So basically today's webinar is going to be in two phases. We're going to go into the 14 different strategies in property that you can use to build your own property business. And I say six figures because indeed, using some of the strategies, combining them, you can definitely get up to six figures. And this is not just for me, this is people that I know that are employing the strategies and they've been successful at definitely building a good business from it. And it's all about multiple sources of income, isn't it? Where we're all trying to looking, you might have something else that you do, like a normal day job, but you also want to have this sort of additional source of income. And we can really see the impact of it now with everything that's going on, the importance of having multiple streams of income. So some people will do Amazon, some people will do stocks. I try stocks, but stocks, there's always drama with stocks. But overall, it's just for me, property, it represents a safe asset. You can relatively, that there's some downs, and there's, highs and lows, and property market come, sort of peaks and troughs, but it never really goes below the previous crash. Do you understand? So for me, property is always a good place to kind of park investment financing. But today's webinar isn't even about investment financing. It's more to do with if you didn't have that much and you wanted to get into property, then how could you go about doing it? So I say without a deposit, or if you have 0 to 5,000, typically most people will assume, oh, you wouldn't be able to get access to, earn income from property. But actually, that's not true. You can earn in property. And then we're going to go straight into how that sort of works. So the first thing I wanted to do, let me start to share my screen. So I was going to say that the first hour is going to be about the 14 ways, deep dive into the 14 ways. And then the second hour is going to go more into how to get you started. And then the last bit will be like how I can help. So it's just to give you that framework of, in case you have things to do, kind of know what hour is going to be doing what. So the first hour is the 14 ways. We're going to get through them. It's going to be, it's 2.5 hours or 2 hours. So we'll also we'll have opportunity at the end to for questions and answers. So if there's anything that you kind of want some more clarity on, I'll be happy to explain. But overall, it's packed full of information. So if you have a pen, if you don't have a pen, grab a pen, because one of the things that I want to happen is while I'm going through each of the different ways, that if something resonates with you, then you just write it down. So if, say, for instance, I say, okay, strategy number 1, I already know it's affiliate. So once I'm explaining it, if it's something that you think, actually, I'd like to know a bit more about that, then write it down on a piece of paper, because we're going through 14. So by the time we get to number 14, if you haven't written it down, you probably not remember, So let's just, as we go through, grab a pen and just kind of note the strategies that you seem to want to be, get more information about, or you think that you would, you definitely, like, there was somebody I was talking to yesterday, and she already knows that she wants to be in interior decor. So already once we get to strategy interior decor, she doesn't need to think about it. She writes it down. So it's about just, as we go through and I'm explaining each one, just making a note. Just let me check, make sure nobody else is waiting to come in. Okay, good. So okay, we have somebody who's just joined. Okay, great. I've just seen the notes coming in. All right. So just a quick recap, we're going to go, first hour is going to be about going through the 14 ways and ensuring that you understand each of the different 14 ways. I'll build up to that. So let me share my screen so we can crack on. So the first thing I'm going to ask is just to get an idea of who is on. Are you already in property? I'd really like to know if you already have a property, if you are getting started. So the 3 questions we have are, yes, I have a portfolio. So I have a number of properties. Yes, I have my own home. And the third one is, I'm totally new to the game. So if you could just put it in the chat box. Now, some of you have already been on a similar webinar, so you'd have been through this sort of slide, but don't worry, we're gonna go through this very quickly, but I need to know who, I kind of want to know the demographic of who we have on the webinar. Okay. Okay, great. All right. So, okay, so let's move on. So I always say this big claim. It's, everyone on this webinar, is capable of creating a six-figure business starting today. With the lockdown and everything that we are going through, we can really sit down and just work out a strategy for creating wealth. And the whole point of this webinar is taking us from understanding the different strategies that exist into being able to actually you run your own business and start off. Now I'm gonna stop the video so you can focus on the screen. And then I'm gonna go into the next bit. So just to give a bit of context, I'm Dolapo Oni. Actually, married name is Bolumole, but my business name is Dolapo Oni. Citygate Property Development Limited, the two companies that I have, one is for construction and refurbishment and development, and I've been running that for about 10 years. And Citygate Homes is more of the portfolio management company that just manages the properties that we have alongside with other people's properties that we manage. And then there's London Short Stays, which has had a bit of a hiccup because of the COVID-19 and the lockdown, but it's a business that was also one of the strategies that I will be talking about. And as well, I host a Property Mom podcast, which is a weekly podcast, either released on a Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on what the kids are doing to me during that week. So, so that's the podcast. And then I have 10 solid years of experience in auctions, refurbs, flipping, developments, joint venture deals, refurbishment, all sorts of strategies, and especially quite a number of strategies that I will mention in today's webinar. And then, of course, wife and mom to two kids. So just, that all of this is being juggled, as well as having a family, raising the kids and managing that. And if you're on Insta, then you can see me at Property Mom UK. Now, one of the main areas in when we start thinking about this business is when it comes to an asset, you can either earn income from it by owning that asset, which is the most common way most people know about. But then there are two other ways, which is by controlling the asset and by providing services to the asset. So controlling is where you pretty much are renting the asset from the owner. So you have to source the owner, explain to them the business model that you're trying to run, and then you take management of that property by controlling it. Otherwise, you would be managing that property. So you would have services that you can provide in support of that property. So that's why I have it in a sort of three Venn diagrams, so that you understand that there are different ways you can earn income from the same asset. And this webinar is going to focus more on the control and the service providing side of managing properties. Now, why is this webinar important? Why it is because based on what is going on with our lives today, we can start this business today. It's something that we can pretty much start to work on. And then it really is about leveraging the contacts that we have and knowing that the cost to get into this business, you don't require the high startup costs that you typically would require if you wanted to buy a property, but you can still earn income. And in some of the strategies, I have examples of how that works, where you control a property with a little amount, but you have access to all of the rental at the end of it. So it's understanding that it's a low startup cost and it's something you can get into to start to earn income. And then multiple streams of income, which is important in today's world, like making sure that you have all these different avenues that you're earning income. So yes, you could buy a property and that would be a rental property, but you could also diversify that income into sourcing properties in different ways and providing different services alongside with that property, and then earn additional income. And I'm going to show you that. So the first example I have, and the first strategy, is not immediately obvious because but it's taking advantage of the digital marketplace. And there was a book I read about now about a year ago, just over a year ago, which was talking about the direction in which all businesses are going, which is that most businesses will need to have a digital product attached to their bricks and mortar business. So in order for them to exist in another 5, 10 years. So it's important that when we're thinking about our businesses, that we also are future proofing our businesses. So one of the strategies is strategy number one, which is earning 20 to 50% as an affiliate agent. And that is promoting other digital products. And it's specifically around property. So you could pretty much become an affiliate agent for any product. It could be a course, it could be training sites, it could be memberships where you sign up with those courses, the website provider, and you say, look, I have these potential clients that I would be introducing to your service. What is my affiliate fee for doing that? So a lot of them already have this set. They already have like a funnel where, you know, what all you have to do is just tap into it. All you have to do is to market their product. And once you market that product, you get 20 to 50% of the course or training fee, or if it's a membership, or if it's an app, whatever it is, you get a percentage of whatever of what you refer. And one of the things with this strategy is that I have a box which I will explain, which runs through all of the different strategies, and it's to help you to understand the level of difficulty or proficiency you need to get into the strategy. Now, with affiliate agents, because you are not creating the product, you are only marketing what somebody else has created, and they already have the full pipeline. So for you, it's just about you finding sources that you can market those products. You don't need to really understand property concepts. You know, it's quite low in that respect. You don't have to have much of a budget. In fact, you can have zero budget, and barrier to entry is low as well. However, tech ability, which is your ability to navigate online and do all of that type of stuff, is you do need some proficiency in being a bit technical. So this would be very much tailored to somebody who is already a bit technical, understands the way digital marketing works, and can go on different platforms to promote these products. And then definitely necessary success skills in this strategy is to be able to research, so you can source where you can get property related courses and all of these different training sites. You have to also research where is best to post these links, because what happens is that you create a link, and then that link is your unique link that if somebody clicks on and pays, then automatically it generates your own fee on the basis that somebody was able to buy the product. So, you know, it requires that you write, you post content on all sorts of different avenues, but a simple formula is what questions are people asking. So if you went to, say, for instance, a Facebook group and you signed up with all these different Facebook groups and you saw what questions people are asking, you can very easily know what sort of products you could easily just turn around and offer as your product, you know. And you can also disclose to them that, look, you know, I will receive a fee if you go through and click on it, but it's something that will benefit you. Ultimately, you're delivering a service to that person. So that's strategy number one. And then an example I'll give is 2 courses. So this strategy, I don't employ it as well as some of the other ones, but it's something I've started to develop because I realize the benefit of it. It's one of those things that if, say, for instance, you got into it, you could potentially, all you have to do really is post on one site, and that post will be literally be sitting on that site, and you would be receiving the commission off of that. So I'm trying to show you an example of 2 of the courses, but it's not coming up. So one course I'd signed up for was a course by somebody called Chris Locke, and it's a membership course. And it's because I was already on that course, and I saw a link that said affiliate, and then I signed up and said, oh wow. And just to realize that the course costed was about 1,400 to buy, but then if you referred somebody to that same course using your affiliate link, you would get 700, which is half, 50% of the course value. So that already incentivizes me to go looking for people who would want to create, you know, their own courses. And then moving on to the next strategy is where you earn commission as a service accommodation agent. And this is where you promote other people's service accommodation rentals. And with this strategy, it saves you from needing to actually go and acquire the property, because what you do is you just locate people who already have these properties, and then you create a commission structure with them that for everyone that you bring to them, they can then pay you for that service. Now, there are two ways you could do this. You could either decide to structure a fee basis where you'll take 20% of, or 10%, depending on your arrangement, of whatever amount you're able to secure. So say, for instance, you had a guest who wanted to stay at that property for a month, say from the 1st of June to the 30th of June. You would negotiate a price with the landlord, secure it, say for instance, at £100 per night, and then you would market it on to somebody else who was coming and wanted those same nights at £150 per night. So if you imagine that that's a 500 profit, which you didn't have to pay out anything for, that's just the margin that you make from introducing somebody who needs a property to somebody who has a property. And you sort of sit in the middle as an agent, and you get your own commission. So with this strategy, understanding of property concepts is quite low. You need to understand how to calculate the difference between 100 and 150 in that case, in the example I gave. So you just need to understand the margins and understand how to price and negotiate. So it's important that you know how to network with people, you know how to source people who own these properties. But it's very easy actually, because a lot of people that own these types of properties are actually looking for agents that they can work with that will place people in their properties. Because one of the biggest pain points with people that own this type of property is voids. And their basic fear of voids means that they will be open to negotiating with most people, especially if those dates, for instance, are dates that were void, were empty, and they had bookings on either side, and you happen to bring somebody who was going to rent for those dates, then they would be willing to give at a really discounted rate just to secure the booking. So they're always trying to work with agents, and they're easy to find. Locating them in all the different network meetings and Zoom meetings now, they're very easy to find. And this strategy, I had originally said about 2 weeks ago that, this strategy was going to really struggle. It is struggling because of the lockdown. But interestingly enough, from the easing of the lockdown, I've already seen an uptick in the number of enquiries that are coming. So it's definitely a business that will take a bit of time, but I suspect that because there've been quite a lot of casualties along the way with people who had gotten into the strategy before the lockdown, that there will actually be a lot of opportunity for people who want to get into the strategy to really, and the great thing about this strategy in particular, because as a service accommodation search agent, is that you're not taking any of the risk, which will come down to, because we'll come across later on in this webinar where I describe a different strategy where you take on quite a lot of risk, but the rewards are there. So with this one, you take less reward, but it's also less risky, but then you can scale up very quickly on this. So tech ability is medium, barrier to entry is quite low, budget to start is also quite low. And as I said, the understanding of property concepts is not too high either. So I have a company, London Short Stays, which, signing up to that sort of agent, to this sort of agency would help in creating, your first steps to getting on into this strategy, because you can easily earn about £50 a week to £300 a week by just negotiating with the landlord of the properties that we have, and then working out a commission basis. So you take on the property, you register as an agent, you do a 1-day training just to understand how the business works, and then you can pretty much start to market, and you have zero cost and zero exposure. If you get a client, then you book that client into the property and you earn your income. Now, this is strategy number 3, and this is where you create a boutique services company. So this is one of the strategies that I say it's a services related strategy, where what you do is you source landlords and you source companies that need this service. Now, this service is mainly targeted to people who are in the country, and they need access to different services. And what you do is you sit in the middle brokering those services, and you get your own commission off of that. So a lot of them would be travelers or corporate clients that are coming to a city, relocating to a city, and they don't really know their way around. They don't know where to source items. So you can leverage off your knowledge and offer services to them, which range from budget to luxury, which match their requirements. So this strategy is one of the easier ones to get into, because it really is just you brokering different services. Services can range from providing au pairs, providing nanny services, just ad hoc services. But one of the services that what would happen is you would attach yourself to somebody who owned the property, who either ran it as a service accommodation or as a corporate rental, which could be a longer term tenancy, but where they have corporate tenants, and those corporate tenants want that extra service. So you could always provide those services. Now, if you had lots of landlords that you had established that relationship with, and they know that you offer the services, a lot of times they will contact you as the one-stop shop just to arrange something for them. So you can easily just make, all these different margins on all the different services. And there are companies that are fully set up based on this, and they are earning their six figures from just this strategy. Now, strategy number 4 is where you become a buy-to-let HMO serviced accommodation property manager. So this is really just property management. You're just managing properties and you're earning 20%. Now for the buy-to-let, you probably are earning more of the 10% on the 10% scale. But by the time you get to HMO and service accommodation, because those strategies require a lot of hands-on and are quite intense, landlords are quite happy to pay up to 20% just for somebody else to take that on. A lot of landlords will get into the strategies because they are very high cash. They have a high cash return, but they do have high turnover and high maintenance as well. So if say, for instance, you were thinking of taking on a property that was located either near you, or you just even wanted to create a business that targeted these types of landlords, is all about locating where those landlords are, understanding what their pain points are, approaching them, and then taking on these properties from them. So it could easily start off as you placing a tenant, because placing tenants in those rooms that they have, especially if it's a HMO, placing tenants there is one of their main pain points. So if you place the tenant, then that's an inroad into having access to the property. Eventually, you can work yourself up to being able to discuss with the landlord to say you wanted to manage the property. Now, with these types of properties, especially with the HMO properties, they are quite steady in terms of their income generating. So their rental. What happens with HMOs is a house of multiple occupancy, where you have a house that has been divided into individual room lets, and each of those rooms is being let out to single or couples. And those type of strategies mean that there's quite a high amount of rent that the landlords are receiving. So if, say, for instance, you even negotiated just 10% to manage this property, sometimes you're talking about, these landlords are receiving £6,000 up to £10,000 in rental alone. And so they're quite happy to give up 10% for not having to deal with the issue, which comes out to which can be about £600 to £1,000 per property. And managing these types of properties really doesn't require you doing much, because you just have a handyman that you can send to those properties, and you can get those properties managed quite easily. If there's any issues, you just have somebody that you can easily call. So with this one, you do have to have a bit more understanding of property concepts, not so much as the fundamentals of how rental works. But if you wanted, say, for instance, to place somebody in the property, you need to understand how to value that room, checking the comparables on the market, and those types of things. So you have a bit more, it would be good to have an understanding of how property rentals work. The budget to get in is low as well, because you don't need that much to get started other than just marketing your services. And you would always start with people you know, or people that they know. And then barrier to entry as well is low. There's not that much in terms of needing capital or even tech ability. It's also fairly low. Definitely necessary skills, people skills. negotiating and networking to get the properties, you know, that you're going to be managing, but negotiating more because there's a lot of negotiating between the tenants who are the property and the landlord. So, and this also goes for service accommodation properties as well, where there's, you know, a lot of times the prices that the clients are paying are so high per night that if anything goes wrong on that, on this, while during their stay, they can be very high strung about it, and they wouldn't be like a typical buy to let tenant that you could take like 3 weeks to get something sorted. Usually with these strategies, you know, turnaround time needs to be very quick. So it's just understanding how to negotiate with people and being organized, having the necessary administration skills and people skills. And strategy number 5 is where you earn as a relocation agent. Now, this strategy I sort of stumbled upon when I started to call around looking for different properties for a client who was relocating to the UK. And I started calling around different agencies, estate agencies, looking for potential accommodation. And they kept referring to me as a relocation agent. They kept asking, are you a relocation agent? Are you a relocation agent? And I then went to go and do the research on this and discovered that relocation agents actually work alongside, say, a relocation company where they're usually tied to a corporate entity. And those corporate entities are trying to relocate their staff to a new country. And what then happens is you need to source not just their accommodation, which is a primary part of what the product offerings you would be servicing that client with, but then all sorts of things like finding people who can help them with the right schools and all these different add-on services. But the primary service is accommodation because they are relocating. So with this strategy, it's really about helping individuals or companies relocate their employees, their families to a new location. They usually will need help settling into a new environment. And you can earn income not just from getting, say, a short-term accommodation, usually between 30 to 90 days, where you would just source a property and earn the income. And because it's a corporate, usually they're corporate tenants, they tend to pay very well. So they are quite high maintenance as well, but they pay very well. So it's very rewarding. And on the flip side, once you've located their short-term accommodation, they usually, because they're here for a longer term, they will also require a longer term accommodation. So just before the lockdown, a client that I had, I asked her, I said, oh, you're relocating from Australia. What are your long-term plans here? And she said, oh, I need somewhere to stay. Now, interestingly enough, so I earned from her finding her a short-term accommodation where she stayed, but then also was able to broker with an estate agent in the area she wanted to move into, located properties for her, and then got paid not only by her for the services that I provided for sourcing the property for her, but also got paid by the estate agents as well, because I helped them place the property. So with different estate agencies have different views on it, but quite a lot of estate agencies I called were happy to do a fee split. And that's what they pretty much refer to as a fee split, where you source a tenant for them because you're helping them in a sense fill their properties. So this is a very good strategy. It works very well if you position yourself as a relocation agent. You source properties for clients who are relocating to a country. You know all of the local intel, so you already have that advantage over them, and all you really need to do is really need to just connect them with all the different services that they will need. So understanding property concepts is medium, because you might also be required to help them even source the property that they want to buy. So, you first, with property, it tends to be a very long-term game, where initially you start off with maybe just providing a short service. Okay, they're staying for a few days, but then you end up giving them a longer term rental, and then they could contact you if you let them know that you could also provide sales services where you'd help them source their properties. So understanding of property concepts is medium, because you need to explain to the clients what they require, understand what their requirements are, and match them with suitable alternatives. And then budget to start low. It really is just about setting up yourself barrier to entry is low as well. And then tech ability is medium only because you need to source the corporate clients, and a lot of them you need to sort of source them online through all the different corporate events and so going online. So it is low to medium in terms of tech ability. And then the necessary success skills is you are for the most part managing high net worth individuals because they're being relocated by their companies, so they are quite you'll need the people skills, you need area knowledge because they'll want you to really be savvy in terms of understanding the location and even providing suggestions to them as to where they could stay that match their requirements. So doing research, networking, and negotiation, those are important skills to have. Now, moving on, I hope I'm explaining each one of the strategies clearly so you're getting value. I'm trying to move on to the next page. Now, strategy number 6. Let's see what time it is. Okay, so it's 7:30. Now, becoming a buying agent for overseas and busy buyers. And the reason why I specifically say overseas or busy buyers is you're looking for clients who don't have the time to actually go online and be searching through different portals. And you'd be surprised that there is actually a market for this. I've met different people who are based here, and but most of my clients have been overseas clients. And what happens is sometimes they don't have the local understanding of the property market, but then they're looking for somebody who is their local contact that they can speak to and get a good understanding of what properties they can buy. And you could step in as an agent for the overseas travelers or people international buyers who then want to purchase their own properties either for investment or for their own use when they come into the country. So as a buyer's agent, you're able to charge the client anywhere from 1% to 3%, depending on your negotiation skills and the value that you're able to sell to them. And then you use your services to basically source in the location. So in this with buying agents, a lot of times they would have a budget, and you would be looking for properties that fit in line with their budget, and you would a lot of times will need to explain to them step by step the process for purchasing in the UK, some of the tax implications. So indeed, your understanding of property concepts will need to be medium to high. Your budget to start, low. As always, it's all about marketing your services. And then barrier to entry is also low. Tech ability, medium, because you are needing to source properties online. You're needing to call a lot of different agents and building that relationship. So networking, research, negotiation, relationship building is a very strong one, because when clients come to you, you want to be able to know who to approach, because you want to be able to negotiate good deals for your clients and thereby earning even better for your services. So buying an agent is a very strong strategy. It's one in which easily, especially if you're based in London, you can hit 6 figures with not too many deals. You only need about 3 or 4 in the year to make that amount, because of course in London the minimum price point for most properties is anywhere from 300, ranging up to millions. So depending on the type of client and their budget, then you can really scale up with using this strategy. And then strategy number 7 is where you become a deal sourcer. Now I split the deal sourcing into 2, because there are rent to rent deals where you package deals just for people who want to rent properties. Now we're going to come to one of the strategies later on where, in order to take control of a property, you don't always have to buy the property, you can also rent that property. So that's called rent to rent, where you will approach the landlord, negotiate a fee with the landlord, and then rent that property outright, and then you can then sublet it based on his agreement. Now what happens as a deal sourcer is that you package those deals, because a lot of people are investors and they're looking for these deals because they're very high return on investment. So you'll see an example when I come later to where some of these property prices are priced at over £1 million, but you're able to rent them for just under £10,000. and then you're able to earn the rental income off of the fact that it's in a really good location. So being a deal sourcer, you package those deals and then you look for investors that you can sell those deals on to. Now, your understanding of property concepts as a deal sourcer is medium to high, because especially for rent to rent, you just need to understand rental dynamics. How much is the rent the landlord you've negotiated? How much have you negotiated with the landlord for him to receive his rent? And how much would that property be able to provide if it was used as a service accommodation, or if it was used as a HMO where you split it into different rooms. So it's really just understanding the valuation with those deals and then packaging it and then finding people to sell them onto. And with these deals, it's easy to make either a set fee where you just charge £2,000 set fee, or you do as a percentage of the rental. So with this one as well, understand the property concept, medium, budget to start low, barrier to entry is low as well. And it's really about you developing all the skills, research to know which areas work for which strategies, and then networking and negotiating with landlords, networking to also pass on those deals to other investors. But that's very easy, because once you get into that sort of property space and you do a lot of networking, then you'll meet these investors that you can broker with. You also meet quite a lot of agents that you can develop relationship with. So people skills is another requirement for being successful as a deal sourcer. Now, strategy number 8 is the sort of more complex deal sourcing. And the only reason why I separated them is because one is more about rental strategies, and this is more about buy-to-let deals. So it does require that you understand a bit more in terms of property concepts. Now, it could be medium to high. Now, with property, you need to understand when you're selling this deal on to an investor, the elements of the deal, what stacks up to make a good deal. So the deal needs to be at a good price where you're purchasing it, you've negotiated with the seller a good price, and then when you've packaged it, you've itemized, okay, this is how much it's going to cost to refurbish it, and then turn it into whatever strategy whoever investor wants to use it as. So if it's a property that is best suited because of the location to be used as a house of multiple occupancy, which is a HMO, then you would package that and you would earn a lot, because those deals are very popular with investors because they're high cash flow deals. But with service accommodation, if you wanted to package a deal that was going to end up being a service accommodation, then you would need to know the location as well. So it needs to be a city center. It needs to be somewhere where it has access to amenities or tourism, something that attracts people so that you reduce the number of nightly voids. So it's one of those ones where you kind of need to have area intel, understand the business, and package the deal so that you can then sell these deals on. The costs of these deals are much higher because people are buying into a property, they are going to refurbish. And with service accommodation and some of these other like buy-to-let strategies, the refurbishment costs aren't too much. But with houses of multiple occupancy, the refurbishment costs can be quite significant. So the deal really needs to stack up. It means that the person needs to really research, understand, really understand finance and the way to put together and value deals, so that, but it's also very lucrative because you basically source a deal, pass it on, you don't have to be involved in any refurbishment or anything, and you get paid a percentage of the deal, or you just negotiate. In one of the deals that somebody brought to me, he was trying to charge £70,000 as his own fee. And when I was trying to negotiate with him, he said, oh no, this is standard practice. So it's just to let you know that, depending on the size of the deal, sometimes deal packagers can really earn good money from them. Now, strategy number 9 is where you earn commission on lease options. Now, lease options is a sort of popular strategy. It's a complex strategy, so it really does require that you have a good understanding of property. But what is actually more important is that you have a good lawyer that can package the option agreements. So it's where you're connecting tenant buyers with motivated sellers. And tenant buyers are people who, they want to own their property, but maybe they don't have enough of a deposit, or they can't get credit yet and they're still working on their credit file. and then you tie them up with, you connect them with people who are looking to sell, but they just need to get their properties off the market. And what happens is you then get your own commission because you've negotiated an agreement with the property seller that this person is going to take this property for a defined rental period, and then the renter can exercise the option at a later date to buy that property. The thing is, if somehow the tenant's circumstances change and they decide not to buy the property, you can either step in and find somebody else who will buy it, or they just, they lose the deal and they walk away. So it's one of those ones where you get paid by both the seller, who is motivated to allow that deal to happen, as well as the tenant, who can't buy that property without you actually brokering that service. For this, and understanding of property concepts is medium, but access to legal and all of the different, it also requires understanding how you would put those deals together. So it is medium to high in terms of your understanding of property concepts. And budget to start as well is low. Barrier to entry is low. Technical ability, because you need to source these properties, you need to reach out to the landlords and understand the way to sort of work with them, because a lot of times you wouldn't necessarily have direct access to the landlord. You may have to go through an agent. So your ability to network, negotiate, and really organize, yourself and all the people's skills will need to be there for you to be successful in this strategy. But in terms of barriers to entry, it's quite low as well. Now, strategy number 10 is where you earn income from interior design. And quite a number of people like this option because it's visual. So it's something that you can easily get into if you already know that you have a flair for it. So designing, this is where, but I specifically say interior design for landlords and agents, as opposed to homeowners, which is a viable strategy on its own. It's just that if you're an interior decorator if you're an interior designer for a homeowner, a lot of times the requirements are a lot higher, and they can be, you're managing a lot more than just the interior design. But with landlords, they really are just trying to get their buy-to-let property styled. They don't have time to do it themselves. They really would just like to outsource it at a reasonable price. And the reason why that is becoming a trend is because a lot of the younger generation that would be the type of tenants, or even, regardless of age, a lot of people really want to have that sort of nicely styled property, and it guarantees that you'll get a better quality of tenant. So a lot of landlords are now sort of putting aside some money towards the interior styling of their properties. Also because of Instagram, and because a lot of property investors are online, they like to showcase all of their properties just to show that they do have stylish properties. So it's quite a trend, and it's one that if you had that skill, you could easily just kind of monetize it, because you would just go for different events, meet up with all these different landlords and offer your services. At some point, one of them will call you just because they need to style out their properties. So, it's really about understanding where to source these landlords or agents, because even agents, a lot of agents I find, sometimes they don't necessarily have an assigned interior decorator, but they know that they need access. So going to different agents along the high street, wherever you are, and putting out your cards and saying, look, this is what I do, you are likely to get some business that way as well. So barrier to entry is quite low. It really is about understanding property concepts more, because you have to style out the properties in a way that will attract the tenant, the choice tenant, but you don't want to spend too much. So you want to be able to source the right type of furnishing. And the interesting thing with interior design is that you get paid by the landlord for the service, but you also get a discount, and sometimes up to 40% discount from whoever is supplying. So if you create, what you do is you create all these different channels to different suppliers, and you will get you'll get the furniture at much discounted rates, up to 30-40%, which you then earn income on, because you're selling it on to the landlord at full value, because that's the retail price. So that is also another way to earn income, and interior design is also quite a strong strategy. And then we're almost getting there. We have 3 more to go. Strategy number 11. And this is where you provide refurbishment and home services. Now, it's sort of different from interior design because interior design is more the finished product. For refurbishment and home services, it's a very strong business because in the UK, like most landlords or homeowners are into refurbishing their homes. So a lot of times they may not be able to move on to the next property. So they're just constantly refurbishing or adding an extension or building a loft and all of these different home services. Now you have to have a black book of contractors. So you just have all these contractors and different service providers that are in your black book effectively, and you earn income of referring them. So you position yourself as a home sort of services company where you either start approaching different landlords to help them with specific problems, and then you can grow that into full-on property management. So I say some of the strategies are gateway strategies. So you know that ultimately you wouldn't mind becoming a property manager for a landlord, rather than go directly and say, oh, I want to manage your property, not knowing what the circumstances are. You could always approach the landlord to find out if there are any pain points that he has with that property. And from that discussion, you start to sort of understand each other and you just have that conversation because, like I said, it's a long-term relationship you're developing. And with these landlords, what happens is they will have maybe an issue that needs to be sorted. If you can sort it out for them, then they just come back to you because they know you're the person that fixes issues. So you can very quickly build up your portfolio of landlords that you're marketing these services to. And you can charge anywhere from 10, 20 to 30%, depending on what you negotiate with the provider. So with building services, a lot of times you can go to the property, see all the things that need to be done. They need to paint this, they need to do this, they need to work out all of that. Find someone, negotiate the price with that person, and then just offer on the service to the landlord and sit in the middle sort of as a manager. So that is the role. You play that role because a lot of times people who are providing services are not always, they could sometimes be very proficient in the English language, but a lot of times they're not. So you can also sit in the middle as that sort of front for them. And for that, you can get up to 20, 30%. Now, strategy number 12 is, now this strategy is specifically targeted to people who want to rent a home and haven't necessarily thought that they could make money doing that. So where, say for instance, you lived in your own place, you could get your own property. What happens is you would, using the strategy, you would take out a larger property and then sublet the other rooms with the approval of the landlord. So this is very much suited to somebody who, that's the lifestyle that they have. They don't necessarily want to live alone, or they prioritize earning some income over living alone. And then you would have all the other rooms let out. And is indeed the first step towards rent to rent, which is the next strategy, because with this strategy, you are renting that property, but you're also you're able to reduce the costs of renting that property by getting other tenants to take, or other lodgers to take on a share of the rental. But if it's done well and look, you source the right property, then you could effectively even get an income from it. It's very much a sort of stepping stone into the actual rent to rent strategy, which is strategy number 13. And this rent to rent was hugely popular just leading up to the lockdown, because people then discovered that rather than going and buying a property before you could earn income on that property, you could just rent the property. So find a landlord who's tired, just wants the property let and managed properly, and rent that property, and you make a differential between the rent you pay and what you charge your clients. Now, with this strategy, there are two main ways I've been mentioning throughout this whole webinar, which is the service accommodation and the buy-to-let, and the HMOs, which is house of multiple occupancy. But you could also just run it as a simple buy-to-let. And the people that use it as a simple buy-to-let will just negotiate a longer term fee with the landlord. Say the property was, say about 1,200 on the market. You would negotiate 1,000 with the landlord and take out the property for 5 years guaranteed rental. and just earn £200 throughout the every month. Interestingly enough, when that same strategy is then tied with service accommodation, then this is where you're renting out the same, you have the same deal structure with the landlord, but then you rent it individually per night or per week. And this strategy really, before the lockdown, was a very strong income generating strategy, because imagine some locations, in different parts of the UK, the rental per night is compared to a hotel nightly booking. So if, say, for instance, a good example is in Maidaville or Swiss Cottage, that sort of area, where if you went to a standard Marriott or one of those types of hotels, you'd be getting it at about £300 per night if just a 2-bed or 1-bed. Now you have a 2-bed flat or a 1-bed flat that you're renting at what, £2,000 per month, but then you're able to charge up to £250, £300 per night. And rent to rent was very strong, because the average net income can really range anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000-4,000. So a good example with this strategy is a 3-bed that I acquired in I think it was a few years ago, and it sort of was by chance, because I found out how much they were renting it out as on a long-term rental, and I was a bit confused because that was about the amount that they were renting it on a short-term rental, so for a week, per week. So it seemed quite a no-brainer to rent it from them long-term, and then turn around and sublet it on a nightly basis, so that even in the low season, you probably be getting £200 per night for a 3-bed in sort of zone 1, zone 2, versus in the high peak season, you're getting anywhere up to 300 per night. So, and this is why rent to rent as a strategy then became hugely popular, because it then meant that with 5 properties in your portfolio, you could pretty much quit your job, because you earned way more than your well, the most, like the average salary in London. So and with this type of property, it was a 3-bed very close to the station. The next door property I checked in recently, and I saw that I sold for just over £1 million in November. But this same property, by the time you added all the different elements that went into it, the deposit, the rental, the staging, the maintenance, all of that, was just about £10,000 to acquire that property. And that's renting directly from the landlord or from an agent. So it's not just the landlord that you can build a relationship with, you can also build a relationship with the agent as well. So I got this property from an agent, and I only really at any point in time had about 7 of these properties just as a cash flow strategy. So a lot of the different strategies I've been telling you about have been based on cash flow as opposed to long-term capital appreciation, which is a completely different topic when you're talking in property. And then strategy number 14, finally. Now, this is a great strategy for building your own portfolio, but it does require that you do have an understanding of property, a real deep understanding. Now, the good thing about a joint venture agreement is you're sourcing and you're buying a property, usually for a flip or a buy to sell, with a cash provider. So you will find somebody who probably has money sitting in the bank. And this season actually is a good time because bank rates are ridiculous. So you go into somebody and saying, look, I know, potentially you could have some amount sitting in the bank earning nothing. If I was to source a good property, would you be willing to? And you always pitch it. You're not asking for a favor. It's not a favor. You are providing a service that they're going to earn significantly from, especially when compared to what is currently going on with their current income. So, you pitching yourself as someone that that can do a joint venture, source a property. It could even be simple at the beginning. Just find a nice, simple property that you can refurbish, add value. It's very important when you're doing this type of joint ventures that you source a property that you can increase the value some way, either by adding a room or reconfiguring the property so that you add the value from the onset. And once you've done that, you can then sell that property on, or even just remortgage the property, hold the property for a few years, and then sell it on once it's appreciated a bit more. And with this strategy, usually the cash provider is the one that brings the cash element of the deal. You will structure, depending on how you do the joint venture, you and them could potentially structure the equity side, where you go to the bank and approach the bank for the leverage, so the mortgage that you're going to use to buy the property. But if you think about it, especially if the property isn't high priced and it's maybe somewhere located just outside of the M25, the initial cost to get into that property, the deposits are quite low. So it's something that somebody could easily put into a project. You could do that project up, sell the property on, give them back a good return on their investment, but because it's a 50-50 deal, you get your own payment for all of the sweat equity that you've put into the deal, the fact that you manage the deal. Most of the time, the investor is not trying to be involved in any of the management. You do the entire management of that deal, but you get paid very well for it. So when that same strategy is employed in the UK, is employed in London, the valuation, sometimes you even getting 50-50 on those deals could be difficult, because there's quite a lot of initial income that goes in from the investor. So even in that case, if you even negotiated 60%, 70% split share, where you got 30% or 40%, it's still a good deal for all of the work that's going into it. So it's a really good strategy, and it's a good strategy to be able to quickly develop a deposit if you wanted to eventually buy your own home or buy your own investment property. So I hope going through the 14 different strategies has been insightful. You've gotten some value from that. If I can get some feedback, that would be helpful, because we're going into the second stage right bang at 8 o'clock. So that's perfect. So that was the idea I had, was 1 hour to go through all of the different strategies, so that, you have an idea of how it works, and then to kind of go on into that. Oh, so there is a bonus strategy I forgot. So because of the world in which we live in now, because everything is online, I feel like blogging your property journey while you're getting along with it. So it doesn't matter, you don't have to be advanced in it. Just at the beginning, just creating an online profile where you're kind of educating people on what you're doing, if it's training courses you're going for, if you sign up to learn more about a particular strategy, putting pictures of yourself in front of building sites, or in front of a refurb, or in front of an interior, just, or posting pictures of beautifully designed, just so people start to tie you to the service. And the idea here is, if you've chosen property as the way you want to build your sort of long-term wealth, and one of these strategies resonates with you, then what you want to do is to approach the market in a way that they can see you and see your progress as you're going through. And so I define this as blogging your property journey, describing and educating your prospects and clients on your journey. So it's really about you just letting them know what your progress is and how you're getting on. So moving to the second phase is how do I get started? So I've said all of these different strategies. Hopefully you've listed the strategies that work for you and that you kind of can get your mind around, and you just need a bit more in-depth understanding of how it works. Now, getting started, it's not really too difficult today, because really a lot of what we're looking for, like when I started, a lot of properties, sourcing properties and all that was very much word of mouth. And I still believe strongly in word of mouth and tapping into your network. There's the famous saying that says your network is your net worth. So it's really thinking about the people you know and the people that they potentially know, and how you can get introduced to them. So the first part of how you get started is really about niche selection. So I call it niche. It's all the different strategies we've been talking about, but when it comes to you picking one or two or three of them, I usually say pick 3 of them and start with the one you're strongest in. So, if you're somebody that loves interior decor, you already have that skill set. You already know people come to your house and they're amazed by all the things you do. It's something you could potentially use as your first entry into the market. So it's really about niche selection, but it's important that it ties in with your strengths. So we're going to go through the strengths analysis. We're going to go through setting your financial goal and your target. And then we're going to also work on identifying which areas, sourcing your gold mine areas. So that's what areas will work for the strategy that you picked. So if it's like, for instance, area doesn't also have to be just physical area. It could also be online, like where do you need to go and source some of the products that you would need online. So it's about really identifying what area you will be developing your business around. And then researching within your network. So this is where we're talking about tapping into your network. So doing a research analysis of doing an analysis of all the people you know, potentially all the agents, how you could source agents, and really working through that. And then what simple tech you can start with to be able to start